Hi, everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today on this networking event. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. I really like the thumbs up acknowledgement. I appreciate it. So this event is about the digitalization of transportation for a more just and more sustainable future. And it's exciting because digitalization is a way that could be really transformative to make our cities more integrated, inclusive, make our transportation and logistics more optimized and easier to access and more enabling connection. But it could also reinforce divides. Digitalization could exacerbate inequality and inequity. It could increase emissions. So it's a really amazing tool that we have, and we're really excited to be able to pilot some things with digitalization, but we also need to make sure that we're harnessing it and harnessing its transformative potential for a more just, more sustainable future. So that's what this panel is about. And it's a super exciting, I think, really interestingly structured panel. And I'm very excited that we have so many people joining to talk about this from their perspectives. We're going to start with an opening from Felipe Kirama from UNEP, who's going to talk a little bit about the broad issue of why and what digitalization is. By the time we finish this panel, I will be able to say digitalization very smoothly, but right now, not so much. Then we're going to have Gonzalo Peyon come in. He's the program director from ITDP Mexico, and he's going to talk a little bit about digitalization and the Mexican context. Then we're going to do a deep dive on two different case studies, and we're going to have two people talk about different perspectives from each case study. One is going to be a deep dive on digitalization and public transport with a focus on Merida, Mexico. And we're going to have Oswaldo Sanchez, who's here in person, who is with Viden, talk about his work with that. And then we'll have Aldo Salomon from the Institute of Mobility and Urban Development from the state of Yucatan also speak to that project. The second case study is going to be on freight. And so we will have Jimena Viorne from the National Institute of Social Economy and Carmen Vasquez, I'm so sorry if I'm slaughtering your names, from Libelu Bike talk about their project. And then at the end, we're going to have two respondents come in. One is Carlos Pardo from UNEP to give some reflections and responses to the case studies that were just presented. And then the other one is Gongomtua Sitangang from ITDP Indonesia. So that's the full scope. Afterwards, we'll open up for questions and have some back and forth. But to kick things off, I'm very pleased and excited that we have a special guest, Claudia Alvarez from IKI, who's going to come up and talk to us a little bit about digitalization from her perspective.
Thank you very much. My name is Claudia Alvarez. I work for the ICI, the International Climate Initiative in Germany. And I'm very pleased to attend this networking session today. As we know, climate change is progressing and natural disasters are increasing on our planet. We see the record-breaking, ever-increasing greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere and the negative impacts of climate change that are felt all around the planet. To meet the Paris climate commitments in 2050, there is no time to waste, so we have to act now. We have a global responsibility to get the emissions down, and like we have set ourselves ambitious targets, mitigation targets, and in order to achieve them, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions significantly across all sectors. However, in the transport sector, there have been no significant reductions within the last decades. So since the transport sector contributes approximately 1/4 of all energy-related carbon dioxide emissions to the atmosphere, the ICI, like the International Climate Initiative I'm working in, that is funded by the German government, has been tackling with this with a remarkable and growing portfolio of projects concerning sustainable mobility. At the moment, there are 29 projects running globally with a total funding of about 213 million euros, supporting 23 countries in the transformation of their transport systems, and 12 further projects with a total funding volume of 88 million euros are planned. So it's a huge initiative, and we have the focus on transport in these projects I've mentioned right now. We build lighthouses. This means we focus specifically on trends and innovations to ignite a boost in certain areas for a certain time, but then move on and dedicate ourselves to new innovation areas. So digitalization, which is the subject today, and in general, and digitalization in transport, are already important topics in our federal government's national plans. For example, the environmental digital agenda in Germany, which includes over 70 specific measures, on the one hand, to steer digitization itself to environmentally friendly paths, on the other hand, to leverage the potential of digitization for climate and environment. So that's why I make all this subject around climate and environment. Digitalization offers great opportunities for more environmentally friendly traffic that you mentioned before, and intelligent traffic control, or the networking of mobility systems. This particular holds also true for urban and peri-urban areas, so the World Urban Forum today. Digitalization can bring positive environmental effects, but not automatically. So it is not a means to itself. That's what you already mentioned at the beginning as too. Therefore, it requires the right framework. Also, the emissions that are produced through digitalization itself, for example, through data centers and cloud services, need to be taken into account. The ICI is supporting with financial means a project that is named Accelerating Access to Low Carbon Urban Mobility Solutions through Digitalization, and is implemented in Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. And for us, it's like one of the first ICI projects that dedicates the focus so much on digitalization. So this is for us, for the ICI in Germany. It's a very, we are very keen to see what this project brings. Right now it's in the preparatory phase, and next year it will start implementing. So we are very much looking forward to the results. And today I think it will be very, very interesting for all of us to see what are the aspects that we need to consider in order to have this just and sustainable transformation. So I'm very much looking forward to fruitful discussions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much for those opening remarks. I think the link to climate change and digitalization as a tool for accelerated action within the right framework is very important. And let's get into the heart of the conversation. So with this, I will pass the mic, so to speak, to Felipe Kirama from UNEP.
Thank you, Amy. Let me share my screen right now. Okay, I think you can see my screen right now. Okay, so good morning for everyone, and thank you for having us in this event. For us, it's very important to share with all of you what our UNEP, and specifically the Sustainable Mobility Unit, is doing in terms of digitalization, and why we consider digitalization very important for the sustainable transport. This is part of a work that we are doing in a team in UNEP, which is made up by Carly Gilbert, Veronica Ruiz, Carlos Pardo, and myself. So first of all, I would like to highlight that mobility, there is a strong relation between mobility and the three planetary crises, which are climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And as we all know, transport is a major and increasing contributor to the climate change. So right now, transport produces around 1/4 of the greenhouse gases, but also it can increase to 1/3 by 2050. And this is basically because by 2040, we expect that the vehicle fleet doubling respect to the business as usual scenario. And this can happen especially in low and middle income countries. Also, the transport is a major source of air pollution in many cities, especially in big cities, producing a lot of air quality issues. Their pollution, it results in around 7 million of premature death, and the transport is a key contributor to this outdoor air pollution. And this is especially an issue in low and middle in developing countries, where the transport emissions are very high due to the fuel quality and also to the vehicle emission technology. And also it plays a role in the third planetary crisis, which is the destruction of ecosystem. As you know, transport infrastructure needs some space, and it requires to intervene some ecosystem, and that cause a lot of damage. So what we are doing from the Sustainable Mobility Unit, basically, we are contributing to climate action and pollution actions. This means to meet the Paris climate targets in terms of decarbonization, but also to reduce the vehicle emissions to improve their quality. And how we are doing this? Basically, we are doing this through actions that contribute to avoid the transport and shift to more efficient modes, especially those that those related with walking and cycling, and also reducing the vehicle emissions from the vehicle fleet. And this basically includes to move to zero emissions vehicles by zero emissions vehicle fleet by 2050. And we find that the digital transformation, it has a very important role to achieve the climate action, nature action, and chemical pollution actions, because it can help us to have a sustainable lifestyle and a consumption of low carbon goods and services. Also, it can inform us about the carbon footprint of different services and goods. It can help us to reduce waste and the pollution. The digital transformation also can facilitate to develop global environmental data principles. It can also facilitate to develop science-based analysis and to know if we are in a good pathway to achieve the SDGs. And also it can help us to develop green economy policies and to develop assessment of environmental risk. So how we integrate the digital transformation in the sustainable transport work? We have different programs in sustainable transport, like the electric mobility program, the Global Fuel Economy Initiative, the Share the Road, and the Partnership for Clean Fuel and Vehicles. And basically, all those programs, for example, the electric mobility program, basically try to introduce sustainable electric mobility programs in low and middle income countries, while the Global Fuel Economy Initiative tries to increase the efficiency of the current vehicle fleet. The Share the Road basically tries to promote the adoption of non-motorized transport, and the Clean Fuels and Vehicles basically tries to help the countries to develop regulation for adopting low sulfur standards and to strengthen the vehicle emission standards. And we think that digitalization is a cross program that can facilitate the implementation of the other programs in the sustainable transport unit. So as Claudia mentioned at the beginning, we are working in the access. Access is our digitalization program, which means accelerating access to a low carbon urban mobility solutions through digitalization. And it's focused on facilitate the reduction of greenhouse gases, pollutant emission, and also to improve the accessibility of vulnerable groups to the sustainable, to the transport systems. So what we understand around the digitalization of transport, we have different concepts right now nowadays in the transport vocabulary. So we have, for example, big data, we have Internet of Things, we have smart cities, we have mobility as a service, and all of them are very, very related with digitalization of transport. But basically, when we say digitalization of transport, we talk about implementation of emerging technologies that look for improve in the current sources of the transport sector, and also to improve the daily life of the citizens. And when we talk about emerging technologies, we talk about basically hardware and software oriented to gather, analyze, present, and add value to the data management that we can collect from the public transport system. So some of these technologies basically are around these topics. So for example, we can talk about smart sensors in vehicles. We can talk about vehicle connectivity to the infrastructure, also between vehicles, and to other kind of things. What we talk basically V2X. We have, for example, blockchains. We have platforms that manage big data. We have digital platforms for new transport services. But also here, I would like to highlight that it's not only what we already know. There is a lot of opportunities to work on this topic. And for example, we also can include information coming from remote emission sensors. We can include, for example, information coming from portable emission monitoring system, and also from air quality sensors. So there is a lot of opportunity to connect external information with the transport system and to do a big data analysis. How we implement access, basically.
Can I jump in and just ask you to wrap up, just because
Okay,
we're running a little bit over time. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do it. So basically, we connect two things: the digital transformation of the transport sector and the avoid, reduce, achieve, improve mobility services. And with those two things, we think that we can reduce the greenhouse gases in the transport sector. And we work at 4 levels: pilots, policies, and national support frameworks. And we put all this knowledge in a regional center. We are working in 6 countries, as Claudia already mentioned, and we have a consortium that is working on these topics. And we have actions at national and at local level. This is my last slide. So what countries can expect from our work in access? We can support them with the regulatory framework. We can support them with capacity building. We can support them with demonstration, and also with data management training. And that's all from my side. I thank you very much for having us in this event.
Thank you, Felipe. I'm sorry. You're perfectly on time. I was just getting a little worried.
No worries.
All right. That was great. Thank you for the overview, and thank you for your participation from UNEP. Clap, everybody. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass this to Gonzalo, who is with ITDP Mexico, and he'll be leading the next section of this presentation, of this panel. Thanks.
Hi, Aime. Hi, everybody. I hope you're having a great time in Poland right now, which I'll be there with you. In ITDP, I think we work for people to access the opportunities that city gives about jobs, education, love, in a sustainable way and without leaving no one behind. And as in past presentations, we've been seeing that digitalization and Internet of Things and other technologies that relate to communications can be a tool to achieve this goal. Please, the next one. So we are going to share some of the experience we have, but first, and I'm going to pass this very quickly because Felipe explained it very well, is that digitalization of transport is the use of digital technologies or communication technologies in different processes involved in the mobility of people and goods. But I think what is highlighted is the most important thing. Before starting any digitalization process or choosing any technology, it's important to clearly define what we want to do and think about policy frameworks and things like that. Otherwise, technology cannot contribute to achieve them, or even can have like negative effects like the ones I may mention before. So for instance, like in education, we had in Mexico, we had a technology program that's called Encyclopedia, like 10 years ago or more, and it had the budget of 3 times of our national university and achieved non-learning it had no learning objectives and achieved nothing regarding how children learned. So the same thing happens with digitalization. So you need to think about this before choosing the technology, like sensors, GPS, advanced vehicle location, accelerometer, software, many things that are there on the market. But also you need to think of this when you collect data, analyze data, and think how you are going to create value with this data, and how this is going to inform decision-making, like planning, process of improvements, regulation, and the availability of different types of information. Next one, please. So it's also important to think who is going to benefit from digitalization. First, we need to think in these like 4 types of beneficiaries. 3 are very concrete: authorities, transport or other service, other transport providers, and users. But also, I think we need to think of our cities and the planet, because this can have the potential of reducing CO2 and increasing road safety. For authorities, it really can improve the governance of transport services, particularly public transport, but as using public infrastructure, this is something very important. It's not simple. So digitalization can really lower the cost of planning, of integrating different transport services, of monitoring and supervision of services, and can help implement different types of policies. For the service providers, it can reduce costs, reduce the use of fuel, plan better, and also having enough information to access better funding streams, or even plan for electric fleets. And for users, it can really change the travel experience, like reducing waiting times, or planning better our travels that we do, be less exposed to air pollutants, and also travel more safety. Next one, please. So in ITDP, we've been working since 2016, at least in the Mexico office. First, we used to call it a smart mobility, and I'm very happy that we are not calling it digitalization, because probably it's a less commercial term. Where we did a panorama in Mexico, or where like these services were in different cities. We also created or defined a data management strategy for Mexico City, because there is already data that is available, but it's not being harvested rightly, and how it can help authorities. And we did a pilot project with share bikes to predict the demand and rebalance the service better. Then we also did an accessibility calculator that can integrate transport services and land use planning, which it's also very important with this accessibility view, and also to assess the access to opportunities in different ways and different modes of transport. And a big thing for us has been the IDEAMOS project, where we work with the digital companies that work with digital platforms in pilot project, policy, and business models, like the digitalization of public transport in Merida and others. And we are very happy now being working in the planning phase of access in Mexico, where we will focus in the digitalization of public transport in Monterrey and Mexico City, cross-docking and last mile delivery, and bike share plan and parking management. Next one, please. So this is a brief example of what we did using the public transport buses. We did an experiment with 2 routes to increase or to improve their services. One was a control route, and the other one was a route where we implemented a strategy to improve their service and have some effects. Next one, please. So after analyzing the issues that the route had, we thought that with a series of alarms, we could improve and change how drivers behave. And so the alarm sound when when drivers were over the speed limits, and other strategies, and had a very interesting effect. Next one, please. So we found that we had an important reduction in fuel and in CO2, and also almost reducing the time that the drivers were speeding and creating a risk situations for users and for other of the routes and also in the street. So it's kind of an interesting example of how digitalization can work for public good, for authorities, but also for users and for transport operators. Next one, please. So now we are going to pass to this very interesting project that's happening now in Merida, implemented by the authorities and a company called Binden. So I think I may already presented them, but just to give a brief context, Merida is a mid-sized city with no mass transit. Half of the population use public transport. And since 2019, it's introducing a very innovative and probably the only model like this in Mexico, where concessions and all public transport, almost all of public transport is being monitored and improved through a digitalization strategy. So I think let's hear it from you, Osvaldo.
Hello. My name is Osvaldo. I'm from Mexico. I represent Binden, a tech company specialized in public transportation. And we strongly believe to move forward the public transportation in emerging markets, we must strive to take data decisions, because data drives us to the future. Next. The chaos and order. The operation of public transportation in emerging markets is very complex and heterogeneous. Like this slide, in the right hand, the real operation is really a mess, but in Binden, we are compressed all this information. This really was a challenge for Binden to create all the transit public operations in all in one cloud platform. We take operational chaos and transform into general transit fit specification. Binden is a traducer from chaos to order. Next, please. Binden has a 3 solution for emerging markets. The first solution is Binden Traffic. Binden Traffic is a fleet management system to provide the GTFS in real time to the cities. Binden Pay is the core to get transactionals in the bus, and Binden Mobility shares the data with GTFS with all the community. Next, please. The case study of Yucatan, the digitalization transport of Yucatan. In Yucatan, we implemented 1,300 buses and mobility as studies in any time. The platform can be prepared to generate studies mobilities in real time. And now I implemented the payment system in the city and the public transport app. In the public transport app, in the last 6 months, we have 100 people is installed in these cell phones. In this is one of the first cities in Mexico to get the GTFS in real time. GTFS is General Transit Fit Specification. It's a very hard work to do in a really transport is heterogeneous and it is a very complex. Next, please. What is our goal for Binden? What is our goal of our company? Our goal is we strive to develop and technification of public transport in emerging markets. No, it's the same technology for developing markets, for emerging markets. Emerging markets is a really interest and really practice to implement technology. The technology must be implemented by technification of the cities. Thank you.
Thanks, Osvaldo. And now I think it's very important to hear from Aldo, from the Institute of Mobility and Urban Development of the state of Yucatan, who's now using the data provided by the company to take better decisions and to improve transit services. Go ahead, Aldo.
Yeah, like you say, it's very important to have all the information. And next slide, please. You can have all the information in the world, but if you have the capacity, institutional and human capacity to process and analyze it, the data is worthless. Here in Instituto de Movilidad y Desarrollo Urbano Territorial of Yucatan, we have been very careful about having the capacity to process and analyze all the information, and we have improved 168 routes in 3 municipalities. We also have raised the profitability of the system, the optimization, and the implicit rates. And we also have decreased the complaints of the users, and we also have been able to make shorter waiting times for these users. Next slide. Something we have been very careful to look on was the attachment route of the attachment rate from the buses to the routes, because we observed that the buses didn't do the route the right way. So we can see that in early 2021, their attachment rate was in the lower 60s, and we have been working with operators to get this up, and we have raised it almost to 90%. We know we can not do 100% because the buses do some moves to get diesel or something like that, but we know we can assure that we can arrive to 95%. This makes our system more efficient because we know that we won't leave people on the street waiting to the buses to arrive for them. Something in the chart of the right, we also have been monitoring the amount of kilometers we offer each hour, because when we years ago we have been offering like plain kilometers, so we know we have peak hours and off-peak hours, and it's illogical to have been offering the same amount of kilometers during these hours because it's burning diesel. And we can see how in 2021, when the off-peak hours were between 10 a.m. and 18 hours, you can see how the passengers per kilometer index, it's always going down and increases in the peak hour. If you can see the chart in the right, you can see how we are offering less kilometers in the off-peak hours, and that increases our passenger per kilometer index. This says we are using a very efficient way the public transportation, and we are not wasting anything. We are not burning diesel just to burn. We are doing a better thing. Next slide, please. In 2021, we have a passenger per kilometer index, and it's you can see that if you are offering a lot of kilometers, this passenger per kilometer index is going to go down. We have analyzed that we have an optimum 2.5 PKI. This is because this makes a break-even point for our public transportation system. So we can see how now in 2022, we have almost arrived to the optimum PKI. Also, we can see the standard deviation to see how we are having a more steadily offer of kilometers, and that's why the standard deviation is lower. Also, we can see the standard deviation of PKI, the per kilometers index by route, dropping. That's because we are having a more efficient, a more proper driven system of transportation. And last, we also have increased our income per kilometer in almost in a 25%. We have a $10.65 per kilometer, and in 2022 we're having like $0.81 US per kilometer. That's all.
Thanks, Aldo. I think this is very important because here we can see also how a system is improved as a whole. Normally in Latin America, or mostly in Mexican cities, we've seen strategies that can address improvements of services per corridor of public transport or bus corridor. Now in Merida, what we are seeing is even with companies or operators that have all buses and all concessions are improving the way they operate, thanks to not just the technology, but how the technology is governed by the state authorities. Next one, please. So right now we are going to see something, a pilot project that it's very close to our hearts in ITDP. So thanks Jimena and Carmen to be here. And it's the digitalization of freight focused on last mile. So this pilot project made possible by the structure of IDEAMOS, these ideas and actions for sustainable and inclusive mobility that we are doing in ITDP with support of IDB and IDB Lab. It's very interesting and very pertinent now, because since the COVID pandemic, online e-commerce has exploded around the world, and it has exploded even more in Latin America, where it has increased 37%. And it's this is only, we think now, and estimates show that it will continue increasing at least 30% per year till now and 2025. So it will, the trips of goods are now becoming similar or increasing the number and the proportion of the whole trips of a city, and this can have different effects. Next one, please. So in what modes of transportation we want our goods to be made? In polluting vehicles, or vehicles that can cause traffic injuries, or is there a more environmental and social and just socially just way to do these deliveries? I think we aim for the second one, and that example, and that's the thing that bike couriers do. But next one, very often bike couriers don't have good working conditions. For the fellows that doesn't speak Spanish, the picture shows fair payments. And so we are seeing now that the weakest part of the chain of this very rapidly growing business of last mile delivery, are the people that are doing the deliveries. So can we contribute or make or produce better opportunities for income of these people, or even or have a more just and better lives, and do their works in a better way, and at the same time reducing emissions? We think it is possible, but not necessarily through how these platforms of delivery work right now. So by promoting this zero emissions delivery, we help the integration of the different technologies with two partners, the INAES, the National Institute of Social Economy, that Jimena will present, and using a platform of a federation of bike deliveries from France that's called Coopcycle. Next one, please. So we make a call for bike deliveries to participate in the project. We received 28 applications, 5 from Mexico, and we choose 7. 5 from Mexico City, 1 from Puebla, and 1 from Jalapa, other smaller cities. We had like different deliveries per week, between 40 and 200 by the type of organization, and this organization has between 6 and 20 people working for the organization. And I call them organizations because what we wanted here is to see if this project could do this. Instead of having like a traditional company for delivery, we could have cooperatives. And these cooperatives have like many bikes, cargo bikes, and one even had an electric bike. Next one, please. So with the Coopcycle, we put this application that's facilitated the way they do the deliveries, or at least we hope that to happen instead of using Excel or WhatsApp or other ways. And so in theory, this could make more efficient use of their time. Next one, please. And the pilot just ended. We are going to publish the report in some weeks now. During the process, 3 of these organizations that not necessarily had like registered to pay taxes and that in Mexico, in the Mexican system, they were registered as a company, but as a cooperative company. With the we had more than 60 participants. Have 78 people completed different capacity building sessions. almost 5,000 deliveries were made through the process. More than 8,000 kilometers were traveled, and a very small reductions of CO2, 2 kilograms compared to using motorcycles. But I think this is very important to show this, because I think this can present a change. So I give the word now to Jimena to tell us more about how INAES work in this project and to improve the delivery couriers' lives.
Thank you. Well, as it says here, my name is Jimena Viorneri, and I'm form part of the Mexican National Institute of Social Economy. And today I want to talk about social economy and cooperativism for labor, dignity, and social justice. And you may wonder what I'm doing here talking about that, and if the main topics are digitalization and mobility. Please, the before. Okay, well, calm down. Don't worry, you didn't get the wrong forum. You're in the good forum. So what I want to achieve today is that in the next forum you attend, your next question will be, why aren't we talking about social economy here? So, well, please, the next one. The real reason why I'm here today is because at the National Institute of Social Economy, we believe that the best way to combat labor precariousness and achieve equity, democracy, justice, and solidarity in organizations and in general in our communities is through the social and solidarity economy model. So please, next one. We have heard that, as Gonzalo mentioned, that the pandemic triggered a huge growth in online commerce and delivery market. And with it, many people had the opportunity to find a job. Next one, please. But also it is true that also the delivery business produced millions of dollars. Those employed in these activities face extremely vulnerable and precarious working conditions. So also we have to be honest. Nowadays, and especially after the pandemic experience, having a source of income is very much appreciated. But we have let this need of job overtake the right of decent jobs. And here I present the difference between the people who is owner the platforms and the one who is working for platforms. And you can see the huge wage gap. Next one, please. And you're still asking, but Jimena, how we can do or how we can change this through social economy? But let me start to telling you what is social economy. And this is a socioeconomic model of collectively owned organizations based on relations of solidarity and cooperation, which through the sustainable management of enterprises place people and work at the center through democratic and participatory decision-making process and the equitable distribution of wealth. And let me say this clear and loud and clear, that the fact that this model places the human being at the center above capital doesn't mean that this shouldn't be profitable. So quite the opposite. Can you change it the next, please? Okay. Well, a very wise man who I have not had the pleasure of meeting personally, but I hope one day to do so, said that the economy enterprises have the obligation to be profitable and economically sustainable. And this man is Cristóbal Colón, a psychologist and founder of the cooperative La Falleda, a yogurt factory in Girona, Spain, whose sole purpose was to employ people with diagnosed mental illness. And he believes that work can be the essential element for these people to have equilibrium, and therefore they can constitute the main therapy for those suffering these mental disorders. La Fagueda, with 56% of the staff made up of mentally handicapped people, is the third largest dairy product company in the region in Spain, and they annually produce more than 50 million euros. So this is a really good example that we can do the cooperative a good profitable model. So please the next one. And if we don't have enough, we have a lot of examples around the world and where the cooperative models has been successful, not only guaranteeing the source of employment, but an income for people, and also as a precursor of democracy, inclusion, and respect for the environment. Please, the next one. And also, if this is not enough, the International Labor Organization, through its centenary declaration for the future of work of 2019, acknowledged that the role of these social economy enterprises is generating decent work, productive employment, and improving living standard for all. So, and also in the ILO's global call to action for human-centered recovery from COVID crisis, they reiterate the social economy as an alternative to mitigate the impact. Please, next one. And it is true that in Mexico, there is still much room for improvement in terms of public policies and legislation, but better now than ever to start putting these needs on the public agenda. So that's why we, from Mexican government, we are working to promote projects such as Rodando Juntas. Through training and accompaniment, we can form not only cooperatives, because that's easy, but real cooperativism. I mean, people who believe, practice, and share the principles and values of cooperativism. And with them, we can change the paradigm where power is not in the people and not in the capital, and where decent and fair and well-paid jobs are a reality. So thank you very much. And I give the mic to Carmen. Or
Thanks.
to Gonzalo,
Thanks,
sorry.
Jimena. Please, next one. So I think Carmen is going to tell us about how her cooperative have benefited from this digitalization strategy, which is some very important part of the gig economy. So Carmen, please go ahead and tell us the story about Libelu Bike.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. So can you please the next slide? Well, the bicycle messenger job has been modernizing and adapting to the needs of the big cities, and in our day has become more than that. The advantages of taking care of the transportation of products and services are reflected in less traffic, less pollution, both atmospheric and auditory, support of the local economy, and a reduction of the food chain. Next slide, please. Well, Libelu Bike is the first bicycle messenger service in the state of Veracruz, and we are adapting our model to the needs of our clients. We are capable of moving a USB or even big loads. Besides, Libelu Bike is involved in the creation of public policies for the improvement of road infrastructure to apply a gender perspective to the mobility, and we encourage more empathy on the road culture of our capital city. Next slide, please. The COVID pandemic showed the world the need of our skills, and that is why Coopcycle arrived in Mexico to help us become professionals with zero carbon emissions. Likewise, the digital era in Mexico is everywhere. So we are offering our clients and allies a digital communication channel in order to make more efficient their work, and thus making us an alternative of the big corporation and monopolies. Coopcycle, it's a federation of bicycle messengers organization or union that was born 6 years ago as a solution to the precarious job condition by creating different tools like their own software and a consensus to make everyone on the community to be able to vote and have a collective property of the platform. The benefits of using the Coopcycle app are reflected in our pockets because the commission for the use of it are fair, and we get useful data such as rush hours, neighborhoods with more traffic, days with more activity, capacity of monitoring or collaborates for deliveries, and also to keep them away from dangerous zone. Next, please. Next slide, please. All this information help us to All this information help us to analyze our daily activities and be able to take the best decisions for the operation and logistic of the deliveries. And we'll make over the city of Jalapa and Puerto de Veracruz, but also in Mexico and Puebla. On the other hand, the process of implementation of the platform has been a challenge due to the fact that every city has different needs of services and configurations. Think about the difference between a metropolitan area from a rural zone or a small town. Than in Mexico, there's a lot. So we will keep working on adapting Coopcycle app to make it sustainable and resilient platform in Mexico. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks, Carmen. It's great to hear from your experience and how I think you are helping to lead the modernization and improvement of delivery using bicycles. And we hope to continue working with you. So I think with this, I want to say thanks for all the participants and give the mic back to Aimee in Poland. So Aimee, can you conduct us for the next part, please?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much, Gonzalo. And I'd like to just give a round of applause to Gonzalo and all of the speakers who just spoke. It was really interesting. I have 1,000 questions, but before we get into that, we're going to jump into our respondents. Before we do that, this slide, if you want to take a picture of it, has the speaker's contact information. And it's so if you want to follow up with anybody in particular, because unfortunately, they're not here. This is a way for you to actually reach them and talk to them later because they were so great. So thank you all. So the next part of the panel is going to be some respondents. We're going to have 2 respondents. Again, on the slide, you can see who the 2 are, and you're also welcome to take a picture of that slide as well. It has their contact information on it if you want to get in touch with them and talk to them later. The first one we'll go to is Carlos Pardo. He's the UNEP consultant who's been working on some of the digitalization work. And I think it would be great, Carlos, if you could spend 3 to 5 minutes giving some reflections, specifically talking about ethics. I'm whispering that to you, not really, but go for it.
Thanks, and thanks for the invitation. I'm sure that if anybody has jet lag, just listening to Aimee saying that I'm going to be talking about ethics, you will have just fallen asleep, and then I don't have slides. But I think that the key thing here is, as we've been working with UNEP on this access project that I think Luis Felipe was sharing a little bit about, we've tried to come up with a way of saying, okay, if we're going to be doing digitalization or digitization of transportation in 6 countries, how can we do the best that we can in terms of not harming anybody in the implementation? So I'm going to just comment a little bit on what we just saw in that regard in the 2 minutes that I have left. And I guess everybody knows that we have a great opportunity and lots of data and computing power. That's the first thing. At the same time, we know that we have a great risk. There's a lot of invasion of privacy, a lot of black boxes in the apps that we see. It's really scary. So how do we create this new opportunity or this new way of addressing digitization and transportation? And I think the examples that we just saw are helping us in understanding what that means. So just to say 4 things, 5 maybe. The first is that we really have to know when we're going to be using digitization. It doesn't have to be used. Like some things work perfectly well with pencil and paper and without any apps. Sometimes it's actually better to not have digitization. Some very low income people don't have cell phones, so we shouldn't sort of do everything only available on a cell phone. And I think there is a good balance in the things that are happening here. And for example, the eco-driving example is a very good way of showing how it is really useful to have digitization. A second thing that I think is useful is, should we collect data? What should we do with that data? When should we destroy the data that we've collected? Because that is also a good thing. Destroying the data that we've collected is good when there's a very high risk of having problems with keeping that data somewhere. And that we didn't talk about that, or we didn't hear about that, but that is something to bear in mind. And another sort of big thing is around who has developed the software. Is it open? For example, the Coopcycle I saw that has a GitHub repository. It's open source. It's sort of not difficult to replicate, and that is great. But in some cases, you have commercial services, and that's also fine, as long as the commercial service is being clear about who owns the data that they collect, how can it be openly accessible, and now how is it responsibly using data, and in which way can we replicate that easily in other contexts, which I think that the explanation that we saw from Vinden and how they're trying to expand to other places in Mexico is a good way of moving forward. And one final thing, and I've just gone 20 seconds beyond the 3 minutes, so I'll just take a little bit more, is something that is seldom talked about, and that Jimena and Carmen showed very well, is let's really avoid any form of gig economy in the digitization of transport. So we have Uber, every food delivery service, like most food delivery services, they are brutally sort of including gig economy types of work, and that's not good. So seeing the Coopcycle and seeing the replications of Coopcycle is something that I found really nice. And I know the public transport is already formalized in the way that has been the services that have been used in the examples that we also saw. So great. It's nice to comment on something and say everything is wonderful. And thanks for inviting me.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlos. And thank you for keeping time. Everyone's been keeping time. I feel really bad for my earlier intervention with Felipe because we're doing great on time. With that, I'm going to invite Gonggam to come up and talk. He's with ITDP Indonesia, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of the work that he's done both in Doha and also what's happening in Jakarta.
Hi, everyone. Oh, sorry, I hear my own voices. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, everyone. As you've seen, my name is Gonggam Tua from ITDP Indonesia. And thank you for having me here. And it was a great presentations from all the speakers today. And I think we can all agree that the main purpose of digitalization in public transport is the positive, which is connecting the users and the public transport system itself, which is connecting the user and public transport itself. But however, from my experience in developing public transport app and web, there are still a few main challenges that need to be addressed, such as the first one is to ensure that the information is correct, comprehensive, and up to date in real-time basis. Otherwise, it will not serve the main purpose. And the second one is you need to ensure that the accessibility aspects are considered throughout the whole process of developing the public transport app and web. For example, you need to present information in a legible way, so that, and also you need to include the voice assistant features so that it can accommodate people with vision impairment. And also from the design itself, you need to design the app and web and simple enough and not too crowded, so that it can accommodate people with cognitive impairment, because people with cognitive impairment tend to have some issue with a crowded page or web page or public transport app. And this, the last one is, we all know now that not everyone can afford a smartphone or the internet. And for example, people from low income and elderly, like my father, he's still using like the old Nokia phone, who is only able to SMS and telephone. So you need to consider all those things when you are developing the public transport app and web. And this tells us that the traditional way of presenting the information, such as physical wayfinding in on ground, are still needed to complement and to accommodate all those different groups. So my conclusion is that the digitalization is good, but you should not eliminate the traditional way of presenting the informations, so that the public transport system is comprehensive, is inclusive for all different from all different groups. Thank you.
That's sorry, that's great. That was a really good point. My mother can't use a smartphone anymore. So this idea of digitalization and how does that affect people who are growing older is a really good point that I actually had never thought about until just now when I was like, oh my God, my poor mother. All right, so we're gonna move into the Q&A section of, thank you, Gong Gong. We're gonna move into the Q&A section. So if you guys have any questions, let me know, like raise your hand, flag. But unless I see something from you, I'm just gonna go into the conversation. But feel free to raise your hand or interject or do as you wish. So I'm gonna sit down with these guys. And I'm gonna turn the camera. There we go. So there were so many really good points. I kind of wanted to start at a high level and talk about, if I can find my notes, this issue of, because one of the ways we structured the conversation was we had kind of a public sector member and we had a private sector member talk about each case study. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about that dynamic because I think we have, and I might be putting words in people's mouths, but the private sector is more nimble, can be more nimble, can be more innovative, can take bigger risks. And the public sector actually's main job is to minimize risk, to manage risk. So how do these two things interact? And how has been the interaction with the different case studies, whether it be Merida or whether it be the co-op cooperative with the bicycle delivery? So anybody want to take that first? I'm gonna call on somebody. Aldo? Do you want to
I
go
lost
first?
my connection like 2 minutes. Can you repeat the question, please?
I just want to explore the dynamic between the partnership between the public sector and the private sector with digitalization. And I thought it might be good to talk about like what are the strengths and what have been some of the challenges that you've had to overcome with that.
Okay, yeah. We have a good relationship. It's becoming, we analyze the data, so we are asking them to provide us the data we need in the form we need it. So we have been doing this partnership, like we have to get this information exactly the way we want it so we can take the decision. So they have been very kind to do this to us, but mainly we have to be the ones who say how we need, how do we need, and when we need it, because if we left these decisions to the private part, they don't know how the public transportation works here in Merida. So that's been the main issue, that we have to know really clearly what we need so the private can do this for us.
Okay. And then Osvaldo, do you want to react to that?
Is correct. The communication is very important, and the most important for us is the government take decision by data driven. Data driven has changed every rules in the transport, because the new routes, because the new decisions has a financial background. The financial background is for the data. The data is provided the one service, massive public transportation service is go well, is go good, because the data is response the decision. The data is the our vision in the private sector is the data drive us to the future, and the data driven decisions. But by get the data is very difficult. The very difficult thing is take all parts together. All parts means the public transportation operators in one only platform, and get all the data, use very difficult techniques for almacenate this data and process. We present the data to government, and government take the decisions. In these decisions affects every person, every citizen in the city. 1 minute, only 1 minute, the citizens have better in the public transport is a very big change in one city. It's a very important important opportunity for the citizens. And Merida is an example how the public politics is done well and get big decision with data, because data drives us to the future.
Interesting. Can both of you talk a little bit about what the respondents mentioned? One about ethics, and how are you addressing the ethics of data or principles that you're applying to the work that you're doing for the digitalization of public transport? And two, about the accessibility and inclusion piece of it, because I think that that's also really important. Who's driving those decisions? Because data can help drive decisions, but you have to set the values. And this goes back to what Gonzalo was talking about, I think at the very beginning, which is what are your goals, like, and how is that affecting the decision making as well?
Yeah, here in Instituto de Movilidad, we have a specific area doing this, taking decisions with this data. We have all the decisions doing by us. We don't let any private person doing this. And we use this information to provide a better service for the citizen. That's what we did. This drive us to do it. We have been using the app, so the citizen know where's the bus. We're only using to get a better service and to be more efficient, and being more efficient comes with being to pollute less and stuff like that. So we are having all the decisions driven by the data.
Great.
One thing in my part is a really big thing, is a really important thing. All the data is for the government, no is for the private enterprise. Or we are private enterprise, only get the tools to get the data. And the data, all the data is for the government, and government take the decisions. No of like that, like our technology only generate the data, and all the data is for the government, not for me. The government is our client, is the owner of the platform.
Great. Okay. I think that's a really important distinction too to make, is that the government does set the value framework for the decisions, and the private sector can come in and help facilitate that, but the government really needs to place that in the forefront. Gonzalo, you have your hand up.
Yes, and I think it's very related to what Osvaldo mentioned at the end. So I think the data can generate value. It can be monetary value, but it can be value of the user, for the users, or the government. So who owns the data and who has the right to exploit that data? if it's a public service, it should be the government who's representing the public good. And the interesting thing that we found in Merida is that this was thought since the beginning. We have many examples of how AVLs, advanced vehicle locations, are being deployed in different transport systems in Mexico and elsewhere. And that information not necessarily goes always for to the government, or they need to add or create additional contracts, like for transferability and interoperability of data, because that's also an issue. That there can be like legacy technologies that can make very difficult or impossible to harvest this information for the public good. So I think that's something very interesting in the alliance of the government of Yucatan and Binden, and that's something that we recommended when we did a pilot project I showed earlier, and that we are going to document, and we hope that we leave guidance for this. And also we have some guidance for this type of contracts, because in the transport world, we are used to concessions contracts, but not necessarily for data contracts. So this opens a new part or another type of services that it's needed in the transport world. And that's sadly, many times that's not always considered.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gonzalo. I want to come back to this because I have 1,000 questions. And partly it's also about the human resources side, the capacity side that you both have talked about. So, but now I want to switch to freight really quickly and talk to the bicycle delivery freight co-op people and a little bit about the relationship that they have, because I think it's a very different relationship from the Institute for Social Economy, the National Institute for Social Economy versus the cooperative. So if you could talk a little bit about your dynamic and how you're working together and the different roles of the public and private sector. And Jimena, why don't you start?
Okay, thanks. Well, I think as the National Institute of Social Economy, we have to work to impulse this kind of cooperatives. And it was a really great experience because I think we all, the actors who were involved, know which was our job. So as the National Institute of Social Economy, we focus on the accompaniment and the capacitation of the cooperatives, because as I said, make cooperatives is really easy because we just make a paper and go to the office where they say, now you're a cooperative, right? But the real thing is to create people who believes in these values. So that's where we focus on, and that was our job. And each actor had their own job. The ITDP made all the logistic and with the delivery people, and also, as mentioned before, who talked before me, the communication is really important to do this. And since the beginning, you have to put on the table all what you want to do, and the object of do that thing, so everyone has the knowledge of what you're doing, about what are you doing and why are you doing that. So that's what can I say. I don't know if also Carmen can mention something about how was work with the government and
Yes, personally, I have a like a cooperative thinking, or I'm very involved with all about cooperatives as a many years ago, but it was a goal like my my team, my co-workers involved in all these in this program, because it was like 8 months, three sessions per week. So it was hard because we need to involve a lot of time and energy, and we have working too. So it was difficult, but they give us a lot of knowledge and tools to make better our cooperative company.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too. This, I think it's a model for thinking also about, for me, this is where my mind goes with public transport and informal public transport, and how are we going to transition to better quality public transport. Part of it is going to have to be this transformation into cooperatives or into some more collective organization than a lot of informal transit maybe. That's great. And also I think that the idea that the government still has this value framework that is the leading edge of the work that comes afterwards, I think is cool. Great. I want to see if there are any questions before I go into another round. I thought there might have been one. Did you have one? Okay. There's a question.
Hi. Is it working? I just took it off so I
Yes.
don't hear my voice. My name is Emmanuel. I work for Greenpeace International. And actually, some of my questions, the reflections and questions I had were already addressed by the panel and the comments that came after the presentations. But I was curious to hear more. First of all, for Jimena, I'm not, the social benefits for me is what really matters in terms of every kind of project, especially if we're talking about what technology has to offer. So I wasn't surprised by our question in the beginning of our presentation. That's actually what I've been questioning myself through a lot of sessions that are talking about smart cities within the World Urban Forum. But yeah, I was thinking a bit about the theme of the indicators and the technologies that are chosen, and the actual lived experience of people, and how the biggest outcomes that this process brings for the users. I already see the time one, which is very valuable. I was a bit confused with the PKI index, if someone can explain it a little better, because when someone mentioned that, it sounded to me that maybe the transport could get more crowded if the index increases. So some clarification on that. And I also want to touch on the comfort aspect, because this is one, does data and the digitalization process help with the comfort of the transport in general? Like, can the use be more distributed in a way that it's not so crowded? Can this kind of technology support the improvement of the policies in terms of having the obvious things like having more buses during rush hours and things like that? Because that also means we do have a challenge of tackling mindset change, because in many countries like mine, I come from Brazil, and I see a lot of other global south countries, the use of cars is seen as either freedom, or it means that you belong to a certain social class, so it's a status thing. So for us to get to address public transport really in a sense that it will support climate change, we need a shift in perception to bring more people into the public transport.
Absolutely.
So do you think also digitalization, I also have the trouble with the word, as you can see.
It's a tough one.
Does it help with making public transport more sexy for people, let's say that way, so that we can bring more car users to the public transport system? So just a few reflections on that. Thank you.
Great. No, those are great questions. And Carlos has his hand up ready to answer. So we'll pass it to Carlos.
Yeah, so those are great comments and questions, and thanks for making them so explicit. I think there's three things to have in mind there. The first is that we have the same questions as always, right? In the transportation sector, it's a pretty boring topic. Like, you always have the same question. Like, you want people to get there quicker, to not be killed, to not have sort of environmental problems as they move, and to have a good experience, right? So that's always been the case when we started to ask about this. And there was a comment once in some conference of digital technologies, whatever, and somebody raised their hand and said, so why do we need all this? Amsterdam did wonderful stuff since the 60s when you didn't even have computers, right? And I think that's a very good thing to have in mind. And that's why I always start by saying, let's see whether we need technology for the question that we have, and then see how it's the best way to promote or implement it. So that's a first big thing. Now, how can it help? And I think that's sort of the more interesting question. If we know that we're going to use it and that it's going to be useful, technology can help essentially because you can count things much easier and you have a greater clarity on where things are happening, to whom and how, right? So if you have a user that is not really happy with the service, you can try and get their views by writing on the bus and asking them, or you can give them a very easy way of just pushing a button somewhere and saying, I hated this bus ride, right? Or even saying it was horrible because it was too full of people, or maybe it was too empty. Some people don't like empty vehicles. They think it's unsafe. Many women don't like that. So in the end, technology helps us in making these things much clearer, making the data much easier to understand, and monitoring the changes much better, right? You could do that without technology. You just don't do it so effectively, I guess is what I mean. And that sort of takes you to answering all the other questions you were asking. Can we get people out of cars? Yeah, we need to know why the hell they're riding cars, because it's so stupid to ride a car in many cases. And then we can see, how can we change it? How can we monitor it? How can we ask them specific questions? And how can we sort of segment the users and answer them? How can we make public transport more sexy? Like, can we see whether the key characteristics that people see more positively of public transport? Is it comfort? Is it reliability? Or what is it? And how can we improve that? And then there was a bunch of questions you were asking about IPK, which, I mean, it's useful indicators, but you don't need to know them. I think, like, it's essentially it's a good service when you have a good PKI number, however the term is.
I think there's a danger, and there has been a danger in over-reliance on PKI or IPK that does lead to overcrowding. So I think that is something, but the 2.5 doesn't seem to be that. Oswaldo, you have your hand up, then Gonzalo, you have your hand up.
The sexy part of the digital transformation is bring the balance. By the data driven. The KPI index, if you have a lot of KPI index, you have a bad service. If you have a low KPI index, you know your transport is not affordable, is not efficient. And then the sexy part of digital transformation is get the information and bring balance to the city. How many buses I need in this time? The city's everyday changes. If I have the data in everyday changes, I can predict, I can see when before it's come the problem. And to synthesize the idea, the sexy part of digital transformation is bring the balance to the cities.
I do think balance is sexy. Go ahead, Gonzalo.
Sorry, I just got, so the indicator, so as I probably mentioned at the beginning, so it's very important to set what you want to do. So I think we are now we presented lots of performance indicators, but there are also social and environmental indicators. By the way, I made a mistake in one of the environmental ones. It was 2 tons, not, or 2,000 kilos, not 2 kilos of CO2 reduced with Rolando Juntas. But the important is to have these ideas, or how you are going to set these indicators, or this, for instance, access indicators, or you can disaggregate access indicators for women or things like that. So those are the things that technology can also give you. And for instance, the work that we are doing with the Yucatan government, we had a workshop on indicators. We review a long list of more than 50 indicators with a focus on environment and social and inclusion. So probably we will find some of these indicators that can be contrasted or read at the same time as KPI to take better decisions. And for instance, when you want to balance the service or reduce the number of services in valley hours, that if it's not done with enough information, it can affect, for instance, the travels of women that can go to the market, or things like that. So I think here it's also the important, not just having an indicator every month, but being able to monitor this indicator in real time. So if you are not doing a right decision, it can, you don't need to wait for several days or months, affecting the access to opportunities of different people. So I think that's the vision of the project that we have with the state authorities and with Binder in Merida, and we hope we can present this long list of indicators and short list of indicators to the person that asked the question. And probably the report will be ready in about 6 months.
So 6 months from now, we will go deeper into that. Any final comments before I wrap up? Oh, one more question. Great. Go ahead. There's a microphone coming to you so we can hear you. Kind of. It's coming.
Thank you. I will try to make it very quick because it's already the time. Do you think it's possible to include these digitalization processes in the planning parts of the city? Because I know that in some cities, they start using these mechanisms when their mobility services are somehow already working. But in some cities, in some intermediate cities around the entire world, maybe in Africa, maybe more in Asia even, they're still on the planning process. So can we already, do you have an experience of how to bring this into the planning process, like a step before of using it, but to plan to use it in the future?
Mm-hmm. Anybody have their hands up? Oswaldo. And then Carlos. Oswaldo first.
Sorry,
Thank you for your question, by the way.
I am a very talky man. Sorry. In the example of public transportation, every person to get a bus and every person to down in the bus, we are marked with a GPS coordinate. I don't know who is this person. Only want to know where is the person up and where is the person down. And if you see in your head the map of the city by hour and how all the people move in the city, when you give this information to experts in mobility, has can change the rules in the city, has can see how to grow the city and how to implement planation for the city. This is a example how to the concept of your idea, how to stay. Is already doing in Merida. Every person to get a bus, we are geomarket with people counters in the bus, and you when how to move the city. The question is how vibrant is your city? How vibrant is your city and how planning is your city? With a private perspective, I only make a tool, no a decision. But in the tool, in the data, has changed the rules.
Carlos, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I have like 1 minute. No, just to say, I mean, the question about planning and using digitization for planning is a beautiful question also. Like, we've been working in several projects with a platform called StreetMix, and we were able to use it to collaboratively design a major avenue in Bogota, sort of at least a sketch. So I think that question is crucial to see how we can generate much greater impact. It doesn't have to be at the service provision side. It can also be sort of in the planning stages. But yeah, I know we're at time, so thanks.
Just to add on to that, I think with planning, you can also do things like crowdsourcing data or problems for governments that lack capacity and don't have human resources to do things like monitoring and evaluating. We're looking at maybe machine learning and AI being able to help map out some more problems or map out things like the quality of the sidewalks or the quality of the air. And so there may be ways that data can actually help lower the costs of the data collection needed to do the planning decisions. But anyway, that was just one last aside. I want to give a huge hand to all of our speakers and respondents and to the audience and to everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I do want to just say that I think that it's really interesting that we're talking about data being used or digitalization being used to help set benchmarks, help with monitoring and evaluation, help design tools that allow for more inclusivity and more participation and more cooperative engagement. This is all amazing. And I just think of the one last thing to point out is I think what Gongam was telling about, which is not everything, and even Carlos, not everything needs or can be digitized. And so thinking about what are some of the things that you're missing if you're only looking at digital data. So that's it. This is a wonderful panel. Thank you all.